Good morning. This is the House Appropriations Committee. It is Thursday, March 20th, 2025. It's just after 9 a.m. and we are going to take up a bunch of bills today. In fact, we have 4 bills that we're going to be looking at, 2 this morning and 2 this afternoon, and we will be doing the budget in between, before and after, and maybe lots of after. So the first bill we're looking at is H472, related to professions and occupations regulated by the Office of Professional Regulation. It started in GovOps, it went to Ways and Means, and now it's coming to us, if I have this correct. And I believe Ways and Means, no, this isn't the one. Never mind. It's another bill. Ways and Means is going to bring us something else, but it's not this bill. Okay, so we have Tim and Ted and Lauren here, and I don't, Tucker's name is on here too. I don't know if he's coming. Is Tucker?
I'm for Tucker.
You are Tim and Tucker. Okay, great. Introduce yourself for the record and let us know about the bill.
Indeed. Thank you very much for having me, committee members. For the record, my name is Tim Devlin, Legislative Counsel. Before you, you should have the bill as introduced, that is H472. And this is an act relating to professions and occupations regulated by the Office of Professional Regulation. There are various features of this bill, but Chair Shai, if you'd like, I would be happy to just kind of focus on the appropriation, or would you like me to actually systematically work through the bill?
You do not need to. So we're going to go with option C, which is just give us the highlights of the bill.
Sure, absolutely.
And then talk to us about appropriation.
No problem. The first part of the bill pertains to OPR fees and fund management. Here we have, let's see, Section 1, which spans authority for the Secretary of State to collect and deposit into the Secretary of State Service Fund revenues generated from optional services offered in the normal course of business, including for one-time or periodic sales of data by subscription or other contractual basis. 2, we have a series of flat fee increases. And so we have, for example, for verification of license, for the biennial renewal, let's see, except for let's see.
So these are just general in OPR, not specific to a particular.
Some are general.
Some are.
Some are
okay.
specific.
Okay.
So more general would be an apprenticeship application. More specific would be an astrology shop. There's some of each in there.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
And so moving on to the next part of the bill, we have fee increases for support providers. Here again, we have additional fee increases in Section 3, or singular 1, for peer support providers. And then, let's see, continuing down page 4, we have our duties and disciplinary authority. And Section 4, let's see, breaking to page 5 here, sorry, I just lost my place. Excuse me. Actually, we'll just kind of skip to Section 5 for unauthorized practice. There we have an increase of a penalty for unauthorized practice, a license or a credential. Section 6, let's do the powers of the board or director and advisor professions discipline process. And here we have, you see at the bottom of page 6 going into page 7, if a finding of unprofessional conduct is made, there is a disciplinary action surcharge that is introduced, and that is above in the previous sections as well. That exact number is. Then we move on to cosmetology certificate of approval, and here we have some language about let's see, this is training on the care, styling, and treatment of textured hair. And let's see, some other related elements having to do with training and education for that licensure. And then we move on to nursing assistants license renewal. Here we have Section 8, and I'm on the bottom of page 8 now. Having to do with, let's see, licensee seeking to renew an expired or lapsed license after fewer than 5 years of absence from practice. Let's see, having to repeat and pass competency examinations, as well as the next subdivision. Let's see, provide for. If they do not pass those, then they have to repeat a nurse assistant education program and competency examination. Next part of the bill on page 9, let's do the repeals, funeral service escrow agents, and motor vehicle racing. The first one we have is the repeal of the motor vehicle racing. You see just
What is that? I don't know if we had anything called motor vehicle racing.
Never done.
Do you know anything about it?
I would probably defer to that.
I will have
Okay,
come and get.
You say you repealed it? I'm sorry,
Yes, it is being stricken in
You can't race your car anymore, Dave.
the commission or
the regulation.
sorry, the regulation? Thank
Okay,
you.
well,
Let me check. Yeah.
Lauren will come and talk to us.
Then moving on to section 10, we turn to prepaid funeral funds. And this removes the requirement for there to be an escrow agent when a prepaid funeral arrangement established doesn't prohibit it, just removes the requirement for there to be the escrow agent. And then section 11, we have kind of buttressing language regarding repeals to certain statutory sections, again, for prepaid funeral expenses, duties of escrow agents, and then as well as motor vehicle racing. Moving on to the next part of the bill, and I think that this will be of particular interest to this committee. We have a position executive officer for the regulation of mental health professions. In section 12, particular the Office of Professional Regulation, Position and Appropriation, creates a new position, which would be one new permanent full-time exempt executive officer for the regulation of mental health professions, and that is created in the Office of Professional Regulation. B, the sum of $170,000 is appropriated to the Office of Professional Regulation from the general fund in fiscal year 2026 for the creation of the position of executive officer for the regulation of mental health professions in the Office of Professional Regulation. Else there from.
We'll talk more about that if we understand. Just finish up the bill because you don't get on the page there.
Then moving on to the last page, we have reports, massage therapy establishments. This will create a requirement for OPR on or before November 15th of this year, in consultation with interested stakeholders to submit to the House and Senate GovOps committees, proposed legislation for the regulation of massage therapist establishments. And then we move to the effective dates. Let's see. This actually will take effect on July 1st, 2025, except that section 3 pertaining to fees, peer support providers shall take effect on July 1st, 2027.
Great. Thank you. Question, Ray.
Are all health professionals come under this office? So
All of them, I believe, not all of them.
So we'll have Lauren come. So I want to let council just sort of talk about
It
the,
was a legal question.
yeah. I think that we'll have OPR answer that. That would be a good question for them. And you're welcome to stay there. Tim, if anybody doesn't have any more actual clarifying questions about the legislative language, but then let's have Ted come up and talk about the fiscal. And you may have it, or it's on the website if you don't. I don't even have yours. It's probably I have a pile. If I find them here. Okay.
For the record, Ted Burnett, Joint Fiscal Office. I understand that you all have a paper copy, so I don't know if it's necessary for me to share my screen, but I can if that would be helpful.
Everybody got something they can look at? Okay, I think we're fine. Thanks, Ted.
Perfect. So top line estimate is that the various changes to fees that we can and do typically estimate would generate approximately $220,000 for the professional regulation fund at OPR. These changes include increasing verification of license fees from $20 to $30, reinstating the $200 electrology shop renewal fee, and creating 3 fees, and $50 apprenticeship application fee, $100 specialty endorsement, and a $250 disciplinary action surcharge. And there would be some revenue loss from ending OPR regulation of motor vehicle racing, very small amount. And so these changes are all summarized in this summary table that is at the top-ish of page 2. The increase in verification license fees is estimated to generate about $20,000 of additional revenue in fiscal years 26 and 27. There are 2 years of estimate here because some fees at OPR renew annually, so you have to include both fiscal years to get a sense of that variation. Electrology shops is a small addition of revenue in fiscal year 27, since those renew in odd years, as far as I understand. There are annual apprenticeship applications, little marginal revenue. The big difference is the addition of specialty endorsements. These are available to a wide range of professions. And so OPR estimates that there would be 2,000 such endorsements per year at $100. So that's $200,000 in additional revenue from that piece. And then you can see the small reductions from motor vehicle racing in the next row. Did want to note that there are certain pieces of the bill that JFO does not or cannot estimate. Cannot is the provision that would allow them to charge for data subscription services, the revenue that would flow to the services fund. That revenue it allows Secretary of State's office to charge on a case-by-case basis. And so the revenue would really depend on the types of data asks, the level of subscriptions, and we aren't able to forecast that. And then typically JFO does not forecast kind of disciplinary fines, fees, or penalties. So the disciplinary action surcharge or the penalty for practicing without a license, we just don't estimate that typically within JFO. So that's the general overview of revenue changes. And then, yes, the position is $170,000 and it's a general fund appropriation.
I'm going to get Lauren up. So if there are clarifications about the fiscal note, this is a good time to.
Yes, about, so I know a few years ago, we were running a little short in the OPR fund and we transferred some general fund money to help it, but normally the OPR fund sort of takes care of its own expenses. But I'm curious as to where it is today because you're asking for another general fund appropriation.
Yes. So the Secretary of State is asking for that position, but I looked at the special fund report for fiscal year 24. At that fiscal year close, the professional regulation fund, which is primarily what's being impacted in this bill, had a deficit expenses over revenue of $800,000 and ended with a fund balance of negative 2.1 million. And so Lauren, I think, can better provide context on the trajectory and why there's that kind of structural deficit. A lot of it has to do with compact licensure. So the increase in compacts has really reduced revenue available to professional regulation. And I know they're doing a lot of work to understand how to allocate costs and kind of deal with that imbalance and how they regulate professions. But I defer to her to talk in more detail.
Great. Why don't we get Lauren to join at the table? There's another chair there. The three of you can welcome this.
All right.
Or Tim, if you're, yeah, that's great. We'll have all three of you. Then we come up and down. Yes. Are you okay?
Good morning. For the record, Lauren Hibbert, Deputy Secretary of State. It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning. How would you like me to structure what my comments to you? Do you want me to just address the questions that have already been asked, or would you like me to walk through the rationale for the fees in the bill or the appropriation?
We don't need to talk about the fees.
Okay.
We clearly need to talk about the position for the mental health officer.
Sure.
And you've piqued your curiosity about motor car racing or whatever.
Well,
So you just need to tell us.
curiosity.
You can move that off and focus on the.
Absolutely. Well, what is the Thunder Road motto? It's the nation's site of excitement. So I think that is appropriate, that it's piqued your interest. We have regulated motor vehicle racing for quite some time. When the Office of Professional Regulation was created, we absorbed the previously existing Motor Vehicle Racing Commission. along with a lot of other separately standing boards and commissions when the umbrella agency was created. We conducted, at the request of this body, a sunset report, which is something that the office does under Chapter 57 of Title 26. We do sunrises and we do sunsets. The goal being to make sure that we are always appropriately regulating a profession within our state, not putting unnecessary barriers before an occupation, and that we are adequately protecting the public. So we were asked to do a sunset of motor vehicle racing, and we did that over the course of the last 2 years. We filed our sunset report in January of this year, 25. It is on the legislature's reports website. I can make sure you all have it if you're really interested. And what we found is that Vermont is one of 5 states in the nation that regulates this profession, to the extent it's a profession at all, this profession in the entire nation. And the way that Vermont was regulating it was particularly restrictive and burdensome. So what we found was that set of facts, and then also that the private industry of insurance adequately protects the marketplace because racetracks and fairs have insurance that has requirements that adequately protect the public. So given that our mandate is to not regulate if we do not have to, we are recommending repeal of that entire chapter and moving out of that regulatory space.
Dave?
Do you know if the Racing Commission is being repealed?
The Racing Commission is being repealed. The entire, yes.
Effective date?
The effective date is July 1st of this year, under the way the bill is written.
If the bill
Passes.
I have a constituent who's on that commission, devastated by that.
And I understand that may be.
Get free tickets for a while.
Yes. Yes, we try to not make our recommendations based just on those types of concerns, but on the whole landscape.
So, yeah, quickly, this is really not in our
I
purview.
have a couple of questions, and then I want to go back to what Jim asked. When you say there's a $100 specialty endorsement, is that like for someone who is, let's say you're a pediatrician or you're a surgeon, you have to add that to your regular medical license or any other kind of specialty?
So
everybody, or how does that?
I'm going to loop back to another question and answer your question both at the same time. We do not regulate all healthcare professions. The only healthcare professions that we do not regulate are regulated by the Board of Medical Practice. Physicians are breaked into 2 groups. We call them broadly physicians or MDs, but there's actually allopathic physicians and osteopathic physicians. We regulate the osteopaths, not the allopaths. We also do not regulate PAs or podiatrists. Those are regulated by the Medical Practice Board. In the physician space, there is not a specialty. You're either an allopathic physician or an osteopathic physician. There are not specialties attached to those things, with the one exception of we do have a radiologic license that some physicians hold, which in some ways is a type of specialty. It allows someone who is a physician to operate radiologic technology. But the types of specialties that we're talking about here are more like the firearm specialty for security guards. Or the bill that is moving through that you guys have probably heard about. There's actually 2 of them that are like this. One is psychologists and prescribing authority. That's in Ways and Means this morning. I'll be testifying on that this morning. That means that they are a psychologist, then they go through additional training, additional preceptorship, an additional exam, and then they have a specialty put on their license that says, I'm a psychologist and I can do this advanced thing. The other one is optometry with the advanced therapeutic procedures specialty. You are an optometrist, but then you would seek that specialty. And again, there's additional training, additional requirements, and additional exam. And why we are charging this $100 is that requires additional review on top of the standard application.
So we're kind of moving off of our purview and we have a very tight day, so I really want to stick with what we need to talk
Yes,
about.
but I want to talk about the position.
That's what I'm doing next, is to explain why you need the position and what it covers.
So we were asked by this body on two subsequent years, in 2022 and 2023, Act 117 in 2022 and Act 77 in 2023, to do a review of mental health licensing. We regulate 17 different mental health professions within the Office of Professional Regulation, everything from psychologists to all the allied mental health professionals, which include licensed mental health counselors, marriage and family counselors, the roster. We have the drug and alcohol counselors. There's 3 different types of licensure within that group. So there's 17 different groups. This is a very complicated field. I probably do not have to tell you, we do have a deficit of providers in this state, mental health providers. And these professions have grown in a variety of ways. And the reason why we supported the request of this body, and ultimately what we found, is we think we could be regulating this profession in a better way. And we have recommended, after our 2-year review, multiple stakeholder engagements. I believe we talked to over 200 individual people. We had a series of public meetings on this, that we should consolidate our mental health professions, with the exception of psychologists, into a single board. Right now, we have some that are advisor professions, some that are under different boards. We believe that we should have a single board that looks at streamlining the qualifications across these different silos currently and creating more flexibility. A very classic example is almost all of those professions require that you take a DSM course in your master's or doctoral program. Well, someone may not know when they are choosing their program that they need to take a class that says DSM in the syllabus. So they graduate from their higher education. We receive the transcript. There's nothing on it that says they took the DSM class. And we then are starting to look into syllabi and assignments to see whether someone took the required class. I think the majority of us would agree that if you're a mental health counselor, you should be trained and skilled in the DSM. But a lot of people are doing that, getting that education in a diversity of ways. And currently, if you didn't, for whatever reason, you are precluded from seeking a license. We don't have a path for you to get one. So we want to be able to create a path to do that. What I'm talking about is just like the tip of a thumbnail of the types of issues that we need to do. But the scale of why we need this position created is because we've done this review, and now next session, we are going to be coming with a very large bill related to mental health licensing in this state. It's going to be a repeal and rewrite of about 17 different sections of the law. And then that's going to trigger administrative rulemaking after that work is done. All of this is going to require extensive outreach to stakeholders. The work is not done. We need to continue it. And we really think at this point, we need someone who's a subject matter expert doing that outreach and communication. And the ultimate goal that we found is we need more flexibility, more nimbleness in this profession so that we can adequately ensure that people are qualified and competent, but also allow more flexibility into this profession because of the deficits that we have. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is if we have someone who's on staff, who's able to focus on this. The other thing is we do have 2 other executive officers, one in nursing and one in pharmacy. It's really important to note that mental health licensing is our second most populated profession. If you look at all 17 together, that group is just under nursing, and then pharmacy is next. And the rationale for having executive officers in those other 2 professions is the scale of licensees and the complexity of the profession. And mental health licensing clearly falls within that as well. And we want to be as responsive as we can to building this workforce, which Vermont desperately needs. So that is why we're asking for the position. We are asking for the one-time general fund allocation for this position because we did not have the recommendation finalized when we submitted our budget to the governor. And so it was not in our budget build. We are running at a deficit at OPR. We're currently projecting about a 1.5 for fiscal year 25, ending fiscal year 25. As this committee knows, we have done a lot of work on this. When the secretary and I testified before you earlier, we talked about the OPR money study that we are doing. We were asked to do that by this body. We wanted to do that. And when we started to look into the details of that, we realized we didn't have enough data. So one of the things that we have implemented once we realized our data issue was that we are having our team at OPR do positive reporting, which means that General Counsel Jen Colin, sitting right there, she spends a lot of her day on a variety of professions. But at the end of the day, she needs to say, I spent 45 minutes on social work, 30 minutes on doulas, and 50 minutes on nursing, so that we can get a sense of how our team is using their time day to day. And that is going to give us a lot more data that will help us make a recommendation about the stability of the fund. Representative Harrison is correct. We have traditionally been able to sustain the OPR fund on licensing fees. The issue is multifactorial. We have implemented a lot of compacts in the state which reduce the number of licensees. It's a very good public policy.
We knew that was gonna happen.
It was a very bad financial
For seven of those,
Yes.
we needed the workforce.
Yes.
To make it easy, so we all agreed to that.
And now we are at the place where we're paying the price for those policy decisions. The other thing is that our office has been, will be, and will continue to be committed to work that we receive no funds for at all. So we do these sunrise reports. We've done multiple in the last years. That comes at a considerable cost. Setting up a new profession comes at a considerable cost. So we have been passing through the Senate side a doula bill. We did a sunrise report on community-based doulas. We found that would be appropriate for us to regulate. We're advocating for a certification for that profession. Jen Colin has spent countless hours meeting with the doula community, writing a report. Now we've been testifying on that. We have not received a single dollar to support that work. So we are asking, and we've moved our model so that we're asking for general fund allocation for that type of work before it happens, and also for general fund allocation to set up the profession, because we have not received any money. If we do not receive funds for that, then our other licensees are paying for that work.
So I want to now keep focused on this.
Yes.
bill and this, because we're already running late. We have another bill that we talked about 5 minutes ago. It's okay. It's always interesting. The other two executive officers, they're paid through the general fund in your base, they're paid through the fees.
They are paid through the fees, and
We're asking for a one-time general fund, and then it would go into being paid for.
Exactly.
Okay, I just want to be clear on what it is we're looking at as a committee. So we're not going to vote on this moment. We will have a discussion as a committee to say, do we want the position? Do we want to fund it with general fund? If we don't fund it with general fund, you will go into further deficit. Is that kind of what the
That is
option is?
correct. And I think I am strongly compelled to say, please, we need the position. The position from my perspective is non-negotiable.
Okay.
I think if you choose to not fund it through the general fund, again, we're making a decision to go further into deficit.
Right.
But that is a policy, that position is
More important.
imperative.
Okay.
And we will not be able to meet our mission without it. So if you are considering not including the position, please let me testify.
Yes, okay, priorities are important. Thank you. Just quickly,
One
go
quick
ahead.
question. We have had these compacts now for a few years.
Yes.
Are you studying, or what is the impact of these compacts? Are we getting people who are actually coming here and staying here? Are we losing people who were initially licensed in Vermont? Are they going somewhere else? What's the follow-up?
Our most recent study on that was with the nurse licensure compact. I would have to see the date. I believe that was in 2022 that we filed a report, because that compact we enacted in 19. Of course, all of that profession was impacted significantly by COVID. But we know that we are getting both people who come as travelers on a compact license and stay, but we also know that we are losing people who were Vermont licensed, who are licensed in Vermont, who worked in Vermont, but now participate in.
You should see a migration.
Yeah, it's
Right, okay.
it's complicated.
All right, great. So I just want the committee to be clear on what it is we'll be deciding. Do we want the position? A, and B, how it gets funded. Can you tell me the votes in the committees? Does anybody know? What was GovOps and Ways and Means, is that correct? Can anybody tell me the votes? Matt?
GovOps was 821.
821. I don't think I have anybody. Teddy, do you know from Ways and Means?
1100.
Okay,
There was one.
Ways and Means Committee, at least it's reported on the website on our document page is 1010, and this is 472, right?
right, 1010.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. That's what we need to know. Thank you very much for coming in and testifying. We will figure this out. And if we have questions, we know how to reach you. So, thanks very much. Okay. The next bill we're going to hear is age 397. 397. Erin, do you have some things to pass out? Thank you. Who has the Secretary of State's office? Mike, so this would be your bill, okay? The 472, yeah, okay. So if whoever is, let's see, Tucker, we have the same folks, Tucker, Ted, Chris, whoever's coming up to. Tucker, do you want to come join us at the table? Is this, and so this is the new amendment straw poll, okay. So we have a bill, and again, this started in GovOps, went to Ways and Means. Ways and Means has a further amendment that they just voted on a straw poll this morning, which we have a copy of that little 4-page amendment. Because we have possession, they had to do a straw poll, but they did have a vote. So, take it away for us, please.
Well, good morning, Tucker Anderson Legislative Council. You have in front of you H 397. As you pointed out, we are at the, I would say, tertiary, but I think we're at the quaternary level of amendment here.
So we want to do anything, I don't know what that's.
Some direction from the committee on how to walk you through this would be great, because you have the bills introduced, you have the report of the Committee on Government Operations, you have the report of the Committee on Ways and Means, amending the report of the Committee on Government Operations. You have a floor amendment from Representative Kornheiser amending the report and Committee on Ways and Means.
So it looks like the Ways and Means bill was not a strike all.
Correct.
So we kind of need to look at the first bill. Never
Uh,
got passed, is it as introduced, is that?
No. So I
Okay,
would suggest starting from the report of the Committee on Government Operations, which I believe is posted on the committee's webpage under my name, and it should be draft 2.4.
so we have to go to GovOps webpage.
I believe that Aaron actually posted it on your page.
I have as introduced and Ways and Means report.
I'm posting it right now.
Okay, Erin is posting it right now, so pause just a second.
There's a fiscal note from Lou.
Yeah, we just got,
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it's right here.
All right, let's hear a minute.
And Madam Chair, Chris Joint Fiscal, the fiscal note that's before you is cumulative in that it speaks to what was in both the GovOps report as well as the additions, Ways and
So it's
Means. So,
most up to date
yeah,
information.
so this might be a helpful reference on sort of cumulatively what both committees have recommended
Okay.
fiscally.
It's taking its time showing up. There it is. Did it show up? Yep. Okay. So we are looking at the 1100 how committee got up. So now we know what the vote was. Everybody with 1100. Okay. All right, let's start with that one and then.
What I will do,
Sort of highish level.
high level overview of what GovOps did, and I will pause whenever there is an amendment to the GovOps report from the Ways and Means report and tell you what the changes are.
Thank you.
So working through the first chunk of the GovOps report, there are a few sections dealing with plans and reports from the Division of Emergency Management. These are some detailed amendments to what has to be in the all hazards mitigation plan, when that has to be presented to certain legislative committees, and a specific framework for municipal assistance to be built into the state emergency management plan. That's in sections 1 and 2, which should bring you to page 3 of the GovOps report. The next couple chunks deal with the voluntary buyout program and what GovOps called the voluntary buyout reimbursement program. But there's a change to that name. Section 3 establishes the voluntary buyout program, and that is run through the Division of Emergency Management. They are currently operating a voluntary buyout program that is supported by FEMA funds and run through, I'm not going to remember the abbreviation, but it is the CRMF or the CRDMF, but it's the fund that was created within the division last session to support community resilience and disaster mitigation. This stands up a separate specific program that is just dedicated to voluntary buyouts. In the GovOps report, these buyouts follow the FEMA guidelines, which includes a restriction on any future development on these properties once they have been bought out. And this section was subject to amendment in the Ways and Means Amendment, but a subsequent amendment has removed that amendment. Hopefully you follow that thread right along with me.
Section 3.
Moving into.
Wait, what section, Tom?
Hey, so line 19, the purchase price shall be the full fair market value of the flood-prone property. Is there elsewhere in the statute, a date certain or a time certain where that value was assessed? The July 23 floods, the first reference backwards was, I think, May 1st of 2023 was picked as the date of the full market value.
I would have to go back. This is all relying on the FEMA regs and the FEMA funding standards that backstop this voluntary buyout program. I'll have to look and see what specific temporal limitation is put on the full fair market value. My recollection is that it is the current fair market value of the property, not the
Post-flood.
Well, it's usually before a flood.
Yeah.
We're a little sensitive simply because July 23 and July 24, and I can't recall that there were dates certain that I think the July 24 floods actually went back to the spring of 23, because to say that nobody would know their full market value if they were, anyway, however it's not hanging up, it's also.
So you're saying section 3 is coming out anyway?
no, section 3 is staying.
Okay. Okay, so that wasn't part of the Ways and Means.
I thought that was.
I thought that was-
Section 3 of the GovOps report is staying exactly as we just walked through it. I was noting, just to eliminate any future confusion, that Ways and Means did amend this section, but they have subsequently re-amended their own report to remove their amendment.
Oh, that's what this is. So
They broke out the eraser.
it was out, it was in. So it's like this now at the end of the day.
Correct.
Okay.
That's a pre-confusion.
I will try not to pre-confuse you. So as part of that effort, I will direct you to the Ways and Means amendment because sections 4 and 5 of the GovOps report are replaced in the Ways and Means Amendment.
Okay.
And to give you some background, sections 4 and 5 of the GovOps report established a voluntary buyout reimbursement program and then transferred, which was the wrong term, $1 million from the pilot fund to the program.
They should have appropriated. No,
They should have appropriated it to someone.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah. I'm learning transfers versus appropriations.
Yeah.
I'm learning too. Thank God I love learning so much.
We all wouldn't be in this job. Yes. You never know what you're gonna learn when you.
Working through the Ways and Means Amendment, section 4 amends the pilot special fund, section 32 VSA, section 3709. And the amendments here will cross-reference the subchapter that is established for purposes of this reimbursement program. Section 5, the program is established. It is now called the Municipal Grand List Stabilization Program. Ways and Means called it the Muggles Program in committee. You didn't.
Oh, Muggles, oh yeah, got Harry Potter, okay. You haven't read it? It's another learning experience this summer.
That's the real default.
I won't comment on how many times I've listened to the Jim Dale audiobooks.
Yes.
So the program is established within the Department of Taxes, and the purpose here is to reimburse tax loss at the municipal level whenever these properties are bought out. Would you like me to dip into some of the function here or just note?
I would like to know, there was something at one point, it said 5 years at 100% and 5 years at 50%. Is that staying in?
That is in the Ways and Means Amendment. And if you go to page 3 of that amendment in subsection D, the language now limits these payments to a certain 10-year term. So 10 years is the maximum eligibility for reimbursement for an eligible property. It's broken, as you pointed out, into 5-year terms. So any property that has been eligible and for which the municipality has received payments for 5 consecutive years. You have to keep it consecutive apparently, but you get 5 consecutive years of 100% payments. And then if the property continues to be eligible, the municipality is eligible for 1/2 payments for another 5-year term.
Okay, so let me use an example, because I remember reading this in some other language we had somewhere, or maybe in the budget. If your property taxes before the flood were $100, and now your property taxes, right, and now you have a buyout thing, and it's now only worth $50, you'd be paying, so there's $50 difference in what the tax value is. So the pilot fund would pay the new $50, the $50 difference for 5 years.
I love math. I'd love to also back up to subsection C. That we are starting, that we're mathing from the right point.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to get a concrete, not abstract example, so.
So in subsection C, if you're looking at line 8, the payments shall be calculated using the grand list value of the acquired property for the year during which the property was either damaged by flooding or identified as flood prone by the Commissioner of Public Safety. So that's your starting point. You're looking at the grand list value in the year that the property was damaged. So if it was $100, $100 will be the reimbursement amount for the first 5 years. And then for any subsequent year that the property stays eligible, it'll be $50 a year for the next 5 years.
Okay, that's what I wanted to understand. So it's the full amount of the tax, not the difference between what the property's worth now versus what it was worth before. Because I guess we're sort of thinking the property's not really worth anything if we're doing this, right? If it's that.
And if it's held under the terms of the new 20 VSA section 51 as essentially deed restricted open space in perpetuity.
Yeah. Right.
The value
building is not worth anything. Okay. And so this may be more of a Chris question, but since we like money, we know how much we're talking about in the pilot program? Do we have it? Or is that gonna, you're gonna talk about that in the fiscal mode?
It is in the fiscal note, but I can jump right to it. My colleague Ted Barnett estimates that this program would cost about $550,000 a year in each of the first 5 years, and to the pilot special fund. And you all will recall that the governor's recommended budget for FY '26 proposed a $1 million appropriation from the pilot fund to the tax department to support this program. And that will be enough money to get through more than the first year.
Okay.
There are, just to remind the committee, at the end of FY '24, there was a $10.3 million balance in the pilot special fund. So there's.
We'll get to that. I just wanted to have us all understand the magnitude. We're not talking about hundreds of millions of dollars here, which always makes us feel better. Okay, so continue, Tucker. Thank you.
How do we feel about this section? Is this okay? Another important thing to note, just based off of what Chris said, in subsection E, the top of page 4 of the Ways and Means Amendment. Hanging with me? I'm watching.
Yeah, I've got it. Page 4, E.
Eye contact with Representative Harrison.
No, that's fine. It's a long amendment. And this is the page bill, and I read them last night, and I gotta tell you, it's not easy. It would have been easier to just Ways and Means to be fight off. My own personal opinion, not that I have any feelings about it.
All right, you have a question before we get to section E?
Yeah, I just want to say that, this is supposed to follow FEMA rules. Is that correct?
The buyout program established before this section, yes.
Yes. Now, my understanding is that FEMA only pays 75% of the actual grand list before the flood. Is that the same? It doesn't say that really in here, does it? Is that?
You're
Is
talking
that
about the,
applicable to people that were losing their property? FEMA would buy it out. Of course, then there's a deed restriction that you can't develop it. But it's only 75% of, and it has to be approved by the community, from what I understand. Which is one of the issues, of course, about this grand list. But it's only 75% of.
That's to the homeowner though, not,
The homeowner.
that's completely separate from what we're talking about here. This is a municipal.
and I would also, I don't want to misstate the FEMA regs here, so I am happy to follow up with you afterwards, but there's a difference between what the government entity receives and what the
Right.
homeowner receives as part of the buyout. The buyout is for the full fair market value of the property.
And that's from the community, from the state?
It is currently through the Division of Emergency Management, so the state. And I would have to look into how much FEMA is kicking into the community resiliency and disaster management fund.
So it could be both FEMA money and state money.
Could be to take a look. Maybe JFO can take a look. All right. Ted please takes a look. Sub E. I just wanted to make sure that the committee is aware that the money coming out of the pilot fund for this specific stabilization program, payments are only issued after all of the other pilot fund payments are calculated and issued. And if there is an insufficient balance left over, then all of the payments under this program are reduced proportionately.
We've been at well over 100% in the pilot
Or now.
fund for a couple of years or something. like that.
And this language, Madam Chair, is verbatim from what was in the governor's recommendation.
We are caught up to page 6 of the government operations report. In section 6, there are 2 positions added within the Division of Emergency Management, both full-time exempt positions, creates a municipal grant liaison and an all-hazard mitigation technician. And these positions support both current operations within the division, but also proposals under the GovOps report here.
Okay. We'll ask the committee members about questions about that. That would be not for you guys. Okay. You're just explaining it to us. Okay.
Section 7 creates some support for municipal corporations from the Division of Emergency Management to assist municipalities with certain disaster detection systems, surface water flood monitoring devices, weather alert systems, things of that nature. Section 8 is a report that is due in November, and it is a needs assessment from all of the various stakeholders, and there are quite a few state agency stakeholders that are involved. And that report back essentially is, what do you all need to implement the changes within this act? Section 9 of the Government Operations Report establishes a grant program, the Vermont Community Radio Grant Program. There is an appropriation at the end of the bill for this, but it sets up grants for community radio stations that currently exist and those that are planned. So if you go to page 10 of the GovOps report, you can look at the grant amounts up to 25,000 per station for 7 active community radio stations, and then 10,000 per station for 3 upcoming stations that are currently under construction. And this is tied in through emergency radio dispatches here, emergency notifications.
So is this the one that adds up to 205,000?
That is correct.
Okay. We'll get to that, but I just wanted. Thank you.
The next chunk of the bill deals with municipal finances and indebtedness. There will be one section that is removed by the Ways and Means report, so I will point that out in a moment. Section 10 adds a new section 1585 to Title 24 that allows municipalities to carry forward unexpended funds and assign them to an unassigned fund balance at the end of the fiscal year.
To give them flexibility to help out with, they've got these needs. Yeah, okay, good.
Section 11 adds a new section 1790 to Title 24, granting some emergency borrowing authority to legislative bodies of municipalities. It would allow the legislative body of the municipality to incur indebtedness in the name of the municipal corporation for a period of 5 years or the useful life of the improvement. And all of this is in response to either an all hazards event or a state of emergency. So the authority is triggered by one of those two dates.
It's limited because I think otherwise there have to be town meetings and votes and yada, yada, yada. So they can just do it for the emergencies. Okay, that makes sense.
Section 12 of the Government Operations Report amended 24 VSA Section 1759 to allow level debt servicing for municipal indebtedness. Ways and Means has removed this section through there.
Okay.
The next chunk deals with dam drawdowns. Section 13, this is on page 13 of the Government Operations Report, amends 20 VSA Section 9 related to the emergency powers of the governor to allow the issuance of temporary permits allowing the drawdown of a dam during a state of emergency or an all hazards event, flooding.
We never had that before. I mean, this was part of, I guess, when we had the flooding and the rights, the dam was, right? Okay. Okay.
Which brings us to section 14. Yeah. I will note that the Ways and Means report did add 2 new sections before we get to the appropriations.
Okay.
Those are 13A and 13B. If you're looking at the bottom of page 4 of the Ways and Means Amendment heading into page 5.
Oh, yes.
First, the first amendment is to 24 VSA Section 138, local option tax statute, to change the split between the pilot fund and the municipalities. The proceeds of the local option tax, instead of a 70-30 split, 70 to the municipality, 30 to the pilot fund, it will be 75% to the municipality and 25% to the pilot fund.
Good question, Tom.
Yeah, sure. This is addressing the split. This is a result of more municipalities being able to have a local options tax, the pilot program, the statewide pilot programs that this funds. Our pilots are being reimbursed at 100%, which is a radical change from 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, or 20 years ago, whenever we started the local option tax for the pilots. Being a community that's received a lot in pilot taxes or pilot payments, it's been wonderful to not have to argue with the state. But I understand now, especially now that Waterbury has a local option tax, that there's a surplus in the system. Is that dealt with at all in terms of what's going to happen with this surplus going back to the towns that have local option taxes on a prorated basis?
Ed has done a wonderful job of spelling out how this will be distributed. He's done a ton of research, and I will say that 8 years ago, when I started as a law clerk, the first legislative conversation I sat in on was a JFO presentation about how the pilot fund was about to be fully funded. All of those payments were going to be 100% funded. So we've gotten there and gone beyond. And you're correct that last session, the General Assembly amended 24 VSA Section 138 to open up local option taxes to more municipalities based just on a community vote, not charter amendments and.
Right, but now there's a statewide, we don't have access to this money, right? This isn't, I'm not looking into this couch for extra funds, but
No.
there's pilot funds that are not needed. We're running a surplus in the pilot fund is what I understand. And the question is, will that money, do we have a mechanism in this year's budget or process or any place that discusses how that money might be returned to the communities that
Yes.
contributed to that
Yeah.
surplus?
So that is a Ways and Means thing, and I think that's why they switched to percentages. And some of the pilot money is also now being used, proposed to be used for this flood really disaster relief to help with
The
the
Muggles, the municipal grand list stabilization program.
That's it, the municipal grant list stabilization program, so money from it. So
This is
we'll
the
get
Muggles? This is like the Muggles?
the Muggles. So we can have Ted and Chris from JFO talk about that part, and let's get through the language part.
Connecting.
It's fine. We'll reconnect. Okay.
In section 13B, this is also on page 6 of the Ways and Means Amendment. You have the flooding abatement program that currently exists being extended for another year.
And that, issue taxes. Who, is that from the education fund?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, Madam Chair, this is an extension of a program that you all passed last year. It was one of the first bills that made it through.
yeah,
And the impact to the education fund, we've estimated to be very small, in the magnitude of about $500,000. And that really does not move the needle
That's
much
just-
in the calculation of the yield or the property tax rates.
yes,
And I'm sorry, I'm interested in a lot of this legislation simply because of the community, the
Sure.
communities I represent. Tucker, if you go back to the Ways and Means Amendment, the first instance of amendment says that the municipality shall maintain the acquired property as open space with deed restriction and covenant prohibiting development of the property. That's the current status. If there's a buyout, you can't redevelop it. But there's a language change here that says a municipality may transfer or redevelop the acquired property for purposes of constructing flood resilient housing. How does that balance against what I've always interpreted the FEMA requirement that is no longer developable?
It does not balance. So if a property were to be developed in this manner, then there wouldn't be any buyout funding through FEMA, and it will also put potentially other FEMA funds at risk. But I will note that this morning, Ways and Means on a straw poll vote voted to support a floor amendment to strike that instance of amendment.
That's what you were talking about earlier.
Yes. right.
Thank
So it's
you.
been taken
I
out.
mean, it's a policy that I know my communities are very interested in, but it sounds like it's not possible with federal language in balance with the
Right.
local language. So,
It is possible. It just would not be tied to FEMA backing.
There are other risks inherent
Yeah.
in doing it.
Correct. That is almost the exact phrase that I used in House Ways and Means.
I should swear. You do that, I'll do that, you know.
I'll swear you in. And join the firm of Anderson as an associate. Okay,
Okay, so where's the rest of the money in the original bill? Where are we now? I've lost.
we're gonna go back to the government operations report,
Here we are. Page 14.
page 14, section 14, starting on line 18. In FY 26, under the GovOps report, These are general fund appropriations to the Department of Public Safety. First, $275,000 to support the two positions that I brought up earlier within the Division of Emergency Management. Moving on to page 15, $950,000 to Urban Search and Rescue. It's also within the Division of Emergency Management. And then finally, within this subsection, $205,000 for purposes of funding the Vermont Community Radio Grant Program, which is under Section 9 of the GovOps report, also within the Department of Public Safety. Sub B, there's another appropriation, FY26, $275,000 from the general fund to the Agency of Natural Resources for a fire apparatus. That is a fire truck.
Is this the wildfire thing? Okay, I haven't learned of it as a fire apparatus. I thought it was something else.
It was a brief and exciting moment for me doing some research about whether I could call this a fire truck and finding out that under both Title 20 and Title 23, these are called fire apparati.
I don't think my 5-year-old grandson would be happy if he had to call it a fire apparatus.
Well, it does sound like a Harry Potter.
That's right.
The Ways and Means Amendment also amended the effective dates, but that was just for the purpose of having a retroactive effective date for the abatement program
Yes,
to retroactively extend it from November 24 to November 25.
which would be helpful. Yeah, of course. Okay. Any clarifications needed on the legislation piece?
Do you have any post-confusing comments? Do you have any post-confusing comments?
I've had so many, but I'll keep them to myself.
He may be able to present them while we're going through, let's do the fiscal note.
Morning, everyone. The fiscal note, I think we already covered a lot of this ground through Tucker's excellent run through of the bill, but you'll see some summary language here that describes the sections of the bill in its iteration as recommended by House Ways and Means that speaks specifically to the things that have a fiscal impact. So the top lines are the bill contains $1.705 million of general fund appropriations in FY26. Those are all in section 14 of the bill. The municipal grand list stabilization program that was proposed in section 5 would cost approximately $550,000 for the pilot special fund in each of the initial 5 years, beginning in FY26. That appropriation does not live in this bill. That it is something, if the committee agrees to do this, that you would perhaps continue to reflect that in the budget.
Yes.
The governors recommend, just to remind everybody, did include in the B1100 section a one-time $1 million appropriation from the pilot fund to the tax department to support this program.
So let me ask you on that, Chris. The governor said $1 million. What you're saying is you need $550 a year.
Yeah, so it would cover a little more than the first year.
If we did the $1 million, it would cover.
It gives them a little bit of cushion and gets them into the second year.
Or we could do $550 and do $550 next year.
Yeah, okay.
It doesn't matter for much from a general fund standpoint.
Yeah,
because it's in the pilot.
You really don't have a significant trade-off to consider here because it is from that the pilot fund does have that $10 million surplus in it. So
it's a $10 million surplus.
Yeah. At the end of FY24, that is separate from the issue of prospectively moving forward. There's a structural surplus as well.
There is.
Which will be further addressed when I talk about section 13A.
Okay, well, why don't you continue?
The last thing I wanted to just reiterate was the education fund impact to the flood related abatement. That program is, just over $500,000. And as you eloquently referred to it as decimal dust in the calculation of the yields of the property.
And especially since Ways and Means didn't have a problem with that.
Right. It's a very, very small cost in the grand scheme of things there. I'm not going to read page 2 and page 3. These just go into detail about what these sections do. Section 4 I'm going to skip to the summary of fiscal impact to begin on section 4 and continue from there. The,
You mean page 4?
page 4, yes. So, I really want to jump to the local option piece on section 5, or on page 5, to get to Representative Stevens' question about, local option tax. If you all are really interested in this topic, my colleague Ted wrote an issue brief on the pilot fund that is available on the JFO website that you can read at your convenience. But as a general matter, for the reasons Representative Stevens mentioned, revenues into the pilot special fund from the 30% share of local option tax have been growing rather robustly over time and exceed the amount of cost pressure that the pilot funds represent by increasing the share that the locals should keep from 70-30 to 75-25. Table 1 will show that there is still sufficient revenue coming in to fund that. So this would be a prospective adjustment that would just, as that surplus moving forward, that would shrink into the pilot fund because the locals would be able to keep a slightly larger share. The something I do just want to note, and it is literally a footnote in this conversation, is that this change applies to the vast majority of local option tax revenue, but not for the local option sales tax on jet fuel. There are technical.
Jet fuel, this is the aviation thing.
Yeah, there's a technical reason for that. This is a tiny little niche in the local option tax world, but City of South Burlington has a 1% local option sales tax. It applies to jet fuel sold at the Burlington Airport. That money does not go to the pilot fund. That money is split 70-30 between towns and the T fund because FAA rules restrict its use for aviation related purposes. So the Committee on Ways and Means wanted to simplify this conversation and not address that rather peripheral issue and leave that alone.
So we've had race car driving, we've had fire apparatus, and now we have jet fuel.
Yeah.
Okay,
We have
we have,
And we don't even have a transportation.
we don't even have detail, right?
So I think that covers most of the substance in the fiscal note. If you all have any questions about anything that I haven't covered, all of us who have had some play in this bill are here, so we could go ahead with anything.
Is what we're talking about clear here? Yes.
And just to be clear, the 205 for the radio stations is general fund.
Yes, all of the appropriations in the bill were general fund except for the piece that would be needed to fund from the pilot fund for that.
So page 4 of the fiscal note, section 14 appropriations, there's 3 appropriations, 275 for 2 positions, 950 for search and rescue and fire apparatus, and 205 for radio.
4 appropriations total, 3 to public safety, 1 to A&R.
And
Right.
So you go ahead.
No, I understanding where we're working with in terms of the budget. I asked Tucker to draft an amendment, and I'm not ready to discuss that right now because this morning, and I'll probably direct this to the chair of GovOps, I received a lengthy memo from emergency management that articulated some concerns with the original bill. And I quite frankly have not, because I just got it, had a chance to read it and digest it. And I don't know what's addressed and what's not addressed. And I need to understand their concerns before I feel comfortable in proceeding.
We're not going to vote on this morning, but we do want to understand everything that we can. So maybe we could have the 2 members of GovOps and maybe the meetings also come up. But you guys don't leave, because we'll have more questions of you, but they can take your seats for now.
Jeff, you're
Yeah, I work in my private for plug-in electric. Yeah. So you've heard the questions and the conversations. You don't need to go through great detail of what happened, but if there are things you feel that we ought to know about, and maybe the committee will have a couple questions or anything in your thought process.
For the record, Representative Matt Byron, Chair, House Government Operations and Military Affairs. I think the bulk of the changes that we're speaking to happen in the Ways and Means Committee, so I will defer to the member from that committee for the time being. And then,
Well, when you had the urban search and rescue.
oh, the appropriation, yeah, the
Appropriations piece. And so I guess my question on those would be, how did the two positions get decided? And tell me more about search and rescue and fire trucks.
So apparatus. One by one, the positions were out of the conversations in or around the original draft of the bill, looking for supports to essentially help the smaller municipalities and other aspects of like the communities have more continuity with the communication in and around emergency management.
So did Congress come in and testify about this?
They did speak to it. They said they couldn't ask for positions, but they would welcome them if we gave them to them. In a nutshell.
Go ahead.
Good morning, Teddy Wozniak, Berry City Ways and Means. As the chair mentioned, the smaller municipalities don't, specifically on the grant, I can never remember what it's actually called. The grant support position.
Correct.
Municipalities like Berry, who have a municipal staff of over 100, have capacity to navigate the various grant programs that the state and federal government offered. Smaller towns like Linden, Plainfield, et cetera, who have a volunteer select board, maybe a part-time clerk or an administrator, don't have that capacity. So there was a need from smaller towns. This legislature did a really good job standing up programs last year, but of course, we need folks to be able to access those programs for it to actually be effective. So that position was asked for by members from our more rural municipalities that need help in navigating the reporting, the applying for, et cetera.
Okay, so I just want you to know, in the budget adjustment, and if we need to move into the budget, we will, and in the budget, so there's $15 million that is to offset the cost of denied claims, and there's assistance so that was sort of a FEMA thing that the municipalities are getting, because there's some positions, I think, that are supporting the chief recovery officer and stuff, so they came and asked, so that's there. And then there's another 30 million that the governor put in for this budget for general fund money to be used for the non-federal share related to disaster spending for costs incurred for 24 and 25. So we do have a chunk of money that's being dealt with. We have a chief recovery officer who has now some staff. Some of this money may be matched for highways and roads, which I think have been a problem in some of the floods, we might say. Not just about the houses. So I just wanted to let you know that that's part of it. You may not have been aware of it as you were, hearing about the bill. So I don't know if the positions, whether the positions are maybe already covered to some extent by this other work that's happening through the chief recovery officers. Well, I don't have an answer to that. I don't know if you've checked into that at all.
In talking to the chief recovery officer too, in the immediate aftermath of a disaster declaration, FEMA comes in with administrative support, but that's temporary
Right,
administrative.
well, that's FEMA. I'm talking about state people.
Right, and yes, and they partner with state.
Yeah.
And if that money comes from the feds, that money eventually sunsets. And, these are long-term, these are 10, 15-year recoveries. So part of the motivation for these two positions was to ensure that continuity of working on these things continues even after that additional support sunsets.
Okay. Yes.
Representative Wozniak, this is clearly a flood response or a disaster response bill. Does this how much of this is part of the omnibus bill that you put in, or the scope of what is needed across the board? I know that the bill, we don't get much news. It's lead lined in here. So, but I understand that the omnibus bill from the flood caucus had been split up into pieces. Does this represent a certain percentage of what is being worked on?
Yes, this, so 397 was the original omnibus bill, and then GovOps basically restructured it to be focused largely on governance supports and municipal supports. There were 4 other sections that dealt with some V-Trans and A&R policy and staffing that were pulled out of this, and that those now exist on the wall in the various committees as short form bills. And if I may just add to your other question, Representative Stevens, about the pilot surplus, there's nothing in here that reimburses towns for that $10 million surplus using the Muggles program. Some of that money is going back, but the overall surplus is not addressed significantly in this.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, it's safe, it's all there,
Yes,
there
yes.
it is, so it's not, no, I appreciate it, thank you.
Wayne, go ahead.
So those positions are to help communities do the application and paperwork process. And obviously, that's critical need would be right after major flood or emergency of that sort. But once that's over with, then that need diminishes and those positions will still be there doing what?
Well, there's two positions. The first one is that grant support. And yes, like once the application is done and you're accepted, you're in, but there's a lot of follow-up reporting that needs to be done for all of these towns. And so, you know, if you pick one small rural town with a population of less than 1,000, you know, obviously that does not need a full-time position in perpetuity. But if you take that one town and then multiply it by the 100 small towns, that's what that portfolio of work would be. And then the second position is for an all hazard mitigation technician, which aims to look statewide at, it was originally a flood mitigation technician. We know that we have to deal with a full watershed when we're talking about flooding, and we have regional planning commissions that have various capacities depending on which regional planning commission you're dealing with. So that technician is meant to look statewide, watershed wide, and recommend mitigation projects. And that could also be applicable to wildfires, et cetera.
And if I could add also to that, like the representative, the frequency of events has become far more persistent. So having an established presence seems wise in this moment because we're just seeing one event seems to be bleeding into the other. So this creates a continuity within all of these events. And that's also why we broaden the capture to not just be floods.
We're assuming there though.
Excuse me?
We're assuming, making the assumption that frequency will continue or increase.
I think the frequency exists right now. We've seen it over several years. So it's one of those scenarios where it's, you know, plan for the worst, hope for the best.
Okay, Lynn and then John.
Yeah, we have, we did this previous biennium with ARPA money. We had a municipal technical assistance program that was set up by, I think it was ACCD, came through Commerce, and we approved it in this committee. It was supposed to do exactly what you're saying about the small towns, you know, the big towns with the ARPA money, they could figure out how to deal with it. Small towns of, you know, 3 people on the select board with volunteers and no staff, town clerk maybe. That was supposed to help them figure out how to deal with the ARPA money, similar issues. Is this supposed to just, and I'm not sure if that phases out or if that's going to be continued, or is this landed?
I think it's an additional support.
So if that goes away, this will stay.
John.
That was part of my question here too, because we do have a lot of small towns that have like, you know, 53 people in that.
Yeah.
Not making that up, but, and they do struggle with take, you know, the expertise sometimes, the grant writing skills. So really, I mean, you could have someone, you know, covering a large series of small towns here, essentially, to help them
Exactly.
at a time when there is that one big thing that just affects the region here. So it's more of a regional approach with this folks. Will they be assigned a region here perhaps, just, you know, given the circumstances of the time?
I think that would be a question for DEM, but I would imagine
Assuming that.
there a certain portfolio would be assigned, whether that.
My question was kind of similar to Lynn's there as well, in terms of we already have something in place that is helping to some extent.
You do have some extra staff that work with Doug, I believe. And they have some positions that we're working with communities. There's also the those ready, I guess it's a little bit different. there's some other help that we're doing with, I think, the regional economic development, whatever,
Right.
something grants, REDI. The Rural Caucus organized that a number of years ago, to help small communities who don't have grant writers and, to do that. And some of that may be through regional planning too. So I'm guessing a lot of this actually is, right now it's going through regional planning. I would also just add, because you may not be aware of it, just that we have approved, the emergency board gave $7 million to ACCD last year for these VGAP grants for business, for disaster relief. And they aren't using the whole 7, so 5 million is staying in that program and 2 million is going to VITA, assuming everything gets passed, for a disaster relief revolving loan fund for businesses. So we are definitely coming at this in a number of different ways, because it isn't just one thing, is it? It's kind of all of these things. Jim.
I guess this is probably for Matt, but just quickly looking at the 8-page memo of emergency management that I believe was given to your committee. And there's a lot of recommendations, delete this section, change it. I can't even begin to understand it. And I didn't know, as this was, I believe, testimony in your committee, that those issues been addressed in your draft.
I mean, without having the memo in front of me, I will say like probably some yes, some no. Without having that memo in front of me, I don't feel comfortable speaking to it on the record at this moment.
So, I haven't read this, so I need to understand it. We've got some budgetary issues, that we have to address in this bill, and I've got to understand to make sure what asking for can in fact be done by emergency management before I'm comfortable. So we may have to talk offline. I don't know.
I was just going to recommend that.
Yeah. And we've accounted for some of the apparatus, is that of apparatus? There's others to be discussed. And as you know, this will be coordinated with the budget. Does anybody have any more questions of anybody who has anything to do with this bill?
One last, just to make sure everyone's on the same page with the amendment that was straw polled this morning.
Oh, yes.
In that first section that Representative Stevens was talking about with the construction of flood resilient housing, we changed it, Ways and Means changed it to allow flood resilient housing to be built, and then very quickly realized that that is a whole can of worms that needs a whole lot more discussion than we are able to do. So the straw poll undid that change this morning. So we changed it, and then the straw poll this morning changed it back, is the short.
And so what was your straw poll vote on that?
11-0-0.
Just to be clear.
Yeah, all votes were GovOps, the original Ways and Means report, and then the straw poll this morning.
And-
all 11-0.
And did GovOps also straw poll the Ways and Means First Amendment or Second Amendment or any of the amendments?
We have not yet.
You have not. Okay. All right. Thank you both very much. Thank you, Tucker. Thank you, Chris, and Ted was here. Anyway, thank you all. So we are going to stay here and do some work on the budget, but we're going to take a